Nuniti.
Grizzly Bear.
Grizzly Bear.
Medik.
Chaugus.
Nan.
Charcho.
Grizzly Bear.
Nana.
Grizzly Bear.
Lazy.
Glaser.
Hello and welcome to Give for Grizzlies. Thank you for joining me once again on this cold autumn afternoon. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to be with us to learn more about the iconic grizzly bear, the challenges they face, and how you can help. I'm Nicholas Scapolati, the Executive Director of the Grizzly Bear Foundation, and I'll be your host. I'm at the cabin today from the Swia, the world birthplace and territory of the Sechelt people, and Calpalang, also known as Pender Harbor, BC. To begin in a good way, please join me in acknowledging the Indigenous lands we are all joining from today, and the cultures that have been stewards of these lands since time immemorial. Now to start us off with a special message, please welcome our good friend, companion of the Order of Canada, former president and council of the Haida Nation, an advisor for the Indigenous Roundtable on Grizzly Bear Conservation, Kilsla Kajisting, Miles Richardson.
Sigaila. Good evening. I am Kilsla Kajisting, I am Miles Richardson. I'm from the Kailanas of the Haida Nation, and I'm really pleased to join the Grizzly Bear Foundation in thanking all of you for coming out and supporting this fundraiser, Give for Grizzlies. Grizzly bear in Haida is pronounced Huaji. It's an important crest amongst my people, the Haida people. The Grizzly Bear Foundation has chosen a theme of stewardship, and that's a fundamental responsibility of Indigenous people in each of our places in this world, in this country, and in this province, to steward the balance of life in each of our territories. And here in British Columbia and across Canada, grizzly bears are an important part of that mix of life and an important part of the balance of life. So thank you to the Grizzly Bear Foundation. Thank you to each of you for supporting this worthwhile fundraising effort.
Thank you, Miles. I'm so excited that you are here with us for Give for Grizzlies. This year, our theme is Stewardship Stories. We'll be celebrating the unsung heroes of grizzly bear conservation and recognize our responsibility to safeguard these iconic keystone species, the foods they eat, and the ecosystems they roam. Throughout the show, you'll hear about how you can help support this critical work by bidding in our silent auction or making a donation. Just like last year, we are premiering Give for Grizzlies live on YouTube. So if you need a break or want to check out the auction, just hit pause. Come back to us when you're ready. To view the wonderful items of art and experience you can bid on, please visit our website at www.grizzlybearfoundation.com. To register for the auction, you'll also find a link in the YouTube description below or on our website. Our special is going to run for about an hour, so please sit back with a warm drink and a snack and enjoy. It's been 3 decades since British Columbia's last plan to conserve the iconic grizzly bear. The government has been exceptional in their government-to-government work with First Nations and has listened to Indigenous leadership by changing the name of the plan from a wildlife management plan to a stewardship framework. An important distinction we will discuss later in our panel discussion. This once-in-a-generation opportunity could create a world-leading plan for wildlife stewardship and further conservation through reconciliation. But more must be done to strengthen these documents to ensure they protect the ecosystems grizzly bears roam, the foods they eat, and that they promote sustainable coexistence. Earlier this summer, the BC government launched a public engagement initiative through an online questionnaire. The goal was to gather public feedback on both the draft Grizzly Bear Stewardship Framework and the commercial bear viewing strategy. To respond to this request, our team worked hard to rally thousands of people to speak up for the grizzly bear. And did you ever get loud? Thanks to your voice, the government extended the engagement process, not once, but 3 times. This is something worth celebrating.
Well, welcome back for Give for Grizzlies. I've switched rooms here. So today we have with us Ol Seaweed, Mike Willie, President and CEO of Seawolf Adventures, Hereditary Chief with the Quikwat Sutinau Hawimis, Nation and director of the Grizzly Bear Foundation. We have Dr. Paul Paquette, wildlife behavior and conservation biologist and senior scientist with the Raincoast Conservation Foundation. And we have Laura Grizzly Paws, dancer, drummer, singer, songwriter, academic, educator, devoted to language and culture, and the Statlium Hoshtan community. Her critical work at the Thompson River University on Indigenous education is critical to this discussion we're going to have today. And Laura is also a director at the Grizzly Bear Foundation. And we have Thalaikwatan, Richard Sparrow, good friend and counselor with the Musqueam Indian Band, and our Grizzly Bear Foundation Director of Indigenous-led Conservation. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. So to this day, we struggle to rediscover our place in nature and define an ethic to help us tackle this climate and biodiversity crisis. And in the past, we've had concepts like preservation and untouched wilderness and the promise of parks that continue to threaten and disregard Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous culture. They failed to develop a land or an ethic that would stay this destruction and loss, and that's kind of where we're at now. But there is hope. The decolonization movement, reconciliation have shown us a path forward that with Indigenous leadership and a profound awakening can occur. And in this discussion today, we will explore this meaning of stewardship to different cultures as we work to develop this new ethic and repair our relationship with nature, reconcile our relationship with First Nations, and learn to work through science and Indigenous knowledge, this two-eyed seeing approach to stewardship. So to kick off the conversation, I'd really appreciate starting with Mike Willie.
I think for myself as an Indigenous person with the title Old Seaweed, I'm coming at it from a different paradigm. And the word stewardship, I haven't found a better word other than stewardship, but conservation, I do have a problem with that because conservation, to me, especially owning Seawolf Adventures, you're on social media a lot. You see a lot of self-declared conservationists. So that's, I think it's stewardship has more weight and more teeth. Conservation to me is anybody could call themselves conservationists, right? And for me, I'm coming at it from the aspect of being in the territory, and I don't see these people in there helping me protect the territory. So I think that term is, at least for me, in my opinion, as an Indigenous person, it isn't the correct term. We're coming at it from an ownership piece because stewardship comes out of ownership. For us as Indigenous people, if we were to relate back to our origin stories and the geographic areas where our origin stories began, and where all of the harvesting and resource management took place. So, yeah, I think this is a good question, and I think this is a good panel because we need to be able to bridge that gap somehow. And you mentioned parks earlier. Man, I have BC Parks does not serve us as Indigenous people. It's more for the public. And we've had problems even getting BC Parks to the table. And back home, a lot of kayakers use our beach, wherever the parks are, they for some reason, they want to use our archaeological sites. Right. And it's because the old village sites are the prime spots. I mean, our people have chosen the prime spots, right? And they are on clam digging beaches and stuff. So we haven't been able to clam dig for quite a while because of the biotoxins that, the human waste and stuff like that people leave behind by just using our territory. So that's what BC Parks has done for us. And We've just finished declaring IPCA, two of them, one for Bond Sound, which we call Hada, and one for Thompson Sound, which we call Haquikin, and combined is about 40,000 hectares. And,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. That was just a couple of days ago, and we had over 50 hereditary chiefs sign that declaration. So it's about time for us. I mean, because everything is very slow, right? Like, we when we're meeting and discussing things with the province and the feds, it's really slow pace, and we're focused on salmon. In the IPCA protects a lot of things, but we really want to just focus on our wild salmon. Number one, wild salmon plays a huge role for First Nations that depend on wild salmon, that have been, if that was their diet for thousands and thousands of years, it makes sense to go back. Diabetes is a plague through our communities, and salmon plays a big role in combating diabetes. So for me, it's all about, and for us, it's about food security, but also for the grizzly bears, our people just truly respect grizzly bears, and so the salmon play a huge role, a part of their diet too. We don't really separate ourselves from grizzly bears and us as Bachman people.
Mike, it sounds very personal what you're talking about, right? And as a hereditary chief, as a responsibility to your community, as a responsibility to these other species, salmon and bears. So that's interesting, right? I think, is that what you're kind of getting at? Is that stewardship for you is personal and cultural?
Absolutely. Like, it's personal for me as a human being, as a Bachman person, but collectively we all think the same way. It is about our nation's right to be able to steward our territories and govern our territories and manage the resources within it.
Yeah. You really touched on something there that a lot of our listeners might not have heard of, because, people think of parks as, this good thing of protecting nature, but they actually have quite a history behind them. And that's my culture, right? That's what we've brought. And there's been a misunderstanding of that and used as a tool. Sometimes they do protect areas, and a lot of times they have a lot of problems with them. And I'd like to bring Dr. Paul Paquette. We've had some interesting conversations, and he's talked about stewardship and his discussions with E.O. Wilson, and through Raincoast, talking as a big leader in Indigenous protected areas. And we'd love to hear from Paul's perspective on stewardship and this history that our culture has on conservation.
Well, Nicholas, first of all, I just have to say how pleased I am to be here, and particularly with your guests. This is a real honor for me, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's also an educational opportunity for me as well. Again, I appreciate that always. This question of stewardship is has a long history, of course, and I think most of us are aware of that. And it's a problem of language and definition, and what is the term means to various people, including one of my cats. And it's changed over literally hundreds, if not thousands of years, the idea of stewardship. So that sort of complicates what we all mean by the term and how it's used or misused. My discussions with E.O. Wilson go back to actually the late 1970s and early 1980s. As you know, for those of you who don't know who E.O. Wilson was, he's a very prominent biologist, ecologist, general thinker in Western science. And he was the father of a field that's called sociobiology. But he was a great thinker in terms of the environment. We started discussions late 1970s 78, 79, I was still working on a degree in biology at the time, and but had finished a previous work as in philosophy. I was a philosophy major, and my focus was on ethics and religions and other spiritual viewpoints and histories. And in discussions with E.O. Wilson, the term stewardship came up because he had used it in one of our discussions, and it caught my attention because stewardship had different meanings to me for a variety of reasons, which I'll explain. E.O. Wilson was using it from a environmental protection perspective and using it in the biblical sense. And that's where its original history was. Stewardship has a long history. Its roots are in 15th century Christianity, and it's a Judeo-Christian concept, the word. And it was essentially, as he viewed it, it was caring for God's, where man has responsibility for caring for God's creation. And interestingly enough, E.O. Wilson, being from Alabama, had a background as an evangelical Christian, and that's where the term stewardship was commonly used. But it had a dualistic nature in terms of stewardship, meaning that it was very anthropocentric in the sense that humans were the masters. They had assumed that role from God, and consequently, they were also the stewards. But it was for the benefit of humans, not necessarily for God's creation. So that was a distinction. It was a dualistic distinction. The other issue for me for stewardship as a child, the term was used frequently for at the residential school by the instructors there to describe what they were doing with the students, as they referred to them. They were stewarding them. So I had some concerns when I heard the term beginning to be used in place of ideas of conservation or environmentalism, et cetera.
Yeah, that's, I think, what's interesting, Paul, is that, and Mike started off with that, right? He's like, the closest term I can find in the English language is stewardship, right? Because it's this larger responsibility. But in our culture, where that comes from, has all of this baggage that you talked about. And I think that we're at a really exciting time right now with decolonization and reconciliation, is that, there's different meanings to words. Language is so important. And so I've actually asked Laura to talk a little bit about this. So we'd love to hear from you on that.
Absolutely. So when I think about Indigenous communities having long-lasting relationships with the land and its inhabitants, viewing the nature as being interconnected and sacred, some of the values that often guide who we are as Indigenous peoples, especially on grizzly bears and or sustainability of the total ecosystem, which includes all things, is that really taking a look at and understanding about the importance of holistic connection, that Indigenous knowledge is often seen as a holistic system where well-being of grizzly bears intertwined with the health and the entire ecosystem, looking at the sustainability efforts or the word conservation efforts should really consider a broader impact on how everything is really interconnected. We heard the significance about the salmon and the relationship of the salmon to the bears, etc. But not only that, but to all animals and to the environment. And there's a huge role in regards to respect and reciprocity, a deep respect for the grizzly bears as a fellow living being as well. And as us being caretakers, we don't own the land. We don't own these resources or other living entities, but we are basically stewardships involving reciprocity, taking from the land with gratitude and giving back in ways that sustain the balance of nature. And that whole cultural significance in regards to grizzly bears often holds a cultural significance about the essential roles and the stories and the histories and the ceremonies and the traditional practices that really demonstrate respect, preserving cultural traditional values and sustainability of that. Because, according to oral teachings from our elders from my homelands, is that if we protect the grizzly bear, we're not only just protecting the grizzly bears, but we're also protecting our own cultural identity, our spirituality, but also the ones that fly, the ones that slither, the ones that swim, the ones that crawl, and all things that grow from the earth. And that plays a huge role in regards to how traditional ecological knowledge, Indigenous communities possess a wealth of information that has been existent since time immemorial, including behaviors, habitats, migration patterns, incorporating these knowledge systems into our efforts in regards to being stewards of the land can really enhance our effectiveness about how we relate and identify, but also work with one another in collaborative efforts to preserve and protect. And I think that these sustainable practices as Indigenous communities often are really important in regards to resource management and utilizing traditional methods that ensure long-term health of the ecosystem, as well as learning from integrating Indigenous knowledge practices and how that can really contribute to conservation of grizzly bears, and not just grizzly bears, but the entire ecosystem. And I think that it's really important to recognize and understand that Indigenous knowledge systems is really community driven, and a lot of the roles in regards to leadership plays a crucial role in regards to that communal process involving the input and the census of community, involving Indigenous communities into decision making and or contributing to ensure that our efforts are culturally sensitive and meet the needs of Indigenous peoples, specifically within our province, because there's such a diversity of Indigenous peoples. So when I think about this, it's like the stewardship is deeply rooted in our spiritual and cultural beliefs, which emphasize that interconnectedness of that interdependence of all living things being on the land. It involves a holistic and approach that considers not only present needs of the community, but also the needs of future generation. And in order to really practice that, we have to ensure that we're involving sustainable resource management techniques, such as engaging with communities, collaborating with our Indigenous knowledge keepers, but also with scientists in other areas that can help practice and maintain that ecological biodiversity of overall health of the land and all its resources. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I think about reconciliation, it's our job and our duty in regards to reconciliation. Reconciliation really starts with ourselves, and we have to be willing to ask ourselves, what am I doing? What am I contributing? What are my goals and my actions? Are they aligning with the vision and goals of a project, a community, or an event or a gathering or an institution? And reconciliation really starts with oneself and basically becoming, how do I become a better human being to contribute to the overall cause of whatever that situation is, to make it better, to improve, to gain awareness, and to develop that. And a lot of times really about learning new strategies, being open-minded, and even unlearning old methods of approaches that are not as effective or community-driven.
We're talking about all of these terms, but the one that you hit on is reciprocity. And Robin Wall Kimmerer spoke about that in Braiding Sweetgrass. And I think, and Paul and I have talked a little bit about that too, is this idea that we're using all of these terms: stewardship, conservation, protection, restoration, but this reciprocity idea, this giving back, this shared responsibility among, I have just as much responsibility to the grizzly bear as the grizzly bear does to me, right? The grizzly bear creates these beautiful habitats and is a keystone species in the ecosystems they roam that I love to visit, that just light me up. And so when I heard that and hearing you speak about that today, I think that opens it up to me. The reason we're talking about this, and I'm going to get Richard just to wrap it up really quickly and get people to think about it, because we've been talking about it in our communications, is that importance of what's happening with the government right now and what the Grizzly Bear Foundation is doing about that discussion.
As you mentioned, the stewardship framework is really one of the key components that the roundtable has been identifying as a way that we can come together and continue to advance the conversation in a collective way, bringing forward the perspectives and conversations from many First Nations across British Columbia, as well as in the Yukon. We're really privileged to have those perspectives there. And once again, the individuals that are participating on this panel, many individuals that have really been a key leader within our process, have been guiding this process and identifying that the roundtable could be identified as a mechanism for First Nations to continue to come together, explore, and engage in conversation, network with one another. I feel that if we continue to engage in these type of conversations collectively, we can advance these type of discussions and identify how we see us as people, how we can move forward for the collective good of grizzly bears and all that roam the land. The stewardship has often been reflected as not only just as a concept, but it's always been ingrained to me that it is a right for each and every one of us to ensure that we have a responsibility to those rights in the word stewardship itself.
If you'd like to join this conversation on stewardship, what's happening with the Grizzly Bear Stewardship Framework, please visit our website. You can learn more about it there, and you can send a letter to government to tell them, how you feel about this, your concerns with the plan that we've helped outline for you, and be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Bela Kessler.
Work like this is made possible by generous donors like you. To continue our work for the Bears, we need your help. And there are a lot of ways to give, thanks to some very generous artists and businesses. The first way to give is through our online auction. The link is in the YouTube description below or at www.grizzlybearfoundation.com. I'm always so moved by the generosity of others to help nature. And 100% of the proceeds raised tonight will go to further the welfare and conservation of the grizzly bear. To carry out this critical work, we need your help. Please make a donation today to help address the threats grizzly bears face, to support the field research needed to understand these challenges, to support Indigenous-led conservation, and to protect the habitat and food sources grizzly bears depend upon for survival.
Thanks for joining me for Give for Grizzlies. I hope you'll make a donation and do what you can to help grizzlies, actually for the rest of your life, because they'll need it.
I've always had a particular fascination with grizzly bears. They're such beautiful animals that demand your respect. It's always a pleasure to be able to witness them uninterrupted in their natural habitat. My name's Taylor Burke, and I'm a photographer based on Vancouver Island. My work is deeply inspired by the natural world and the incredible creatures that inhabit it. had the privilege of working closely with Mike Willie and his crew at Seawolf Adventures. Over the years, we've been hosting photography workshops and taking guests on multi-day adventures into the southern Great Bear Rainforest and Kwakawak territory. On these trips, it's not just about wildlife viewing, it's also about supporting Indigenous tourism and embracing the unique perspectives, stories, and struggles of the Kwakawak people, the true stewards of this land. I'm really excited to put forward this print to help support the Grizzly Bear Foundation and the incredible team at Seawolf Adventures. Together, we aim to support the preservation of grizzly bear habitat. With your help, we can make a significant impact on both the preservation of our environment and the grizzly bears within it. I want to express my gratitude to all of you for your support. Thank you so much.
I like to imagine the what ifs. I like the outdoors and the things that crawl around in it. I would love to have a bear walk across a glass ceiling so I could think, what does it look like from underneath? What does it look like from underwater? What does it look like from the salmon's perspective? My sister is the reason for the first grizzly bear, and she said, could you paint me a bear? After painting it, I connected with the eyes and went, oh, look at you. And just loved it. And I just thought, paint another. Their eyes just, I connect with it and I see that they're looking at me. I mean, they are an iconic keystone species. They're strong, but they're still vulnerable. Kind of like humans, we're strong and yet very vulnerable. And often I like to show them with people together so that we can recognize those traits in each other. I really see in the bear's expressions traits that people have thought of as human traits, but I think that all animals have happiness, curiosity, affection, joy, and I like to share those expressions too. My name's Louise Nicholson. This is the artwork that I'm donating to the Grizzly Bear Foundation for their Give for Grizzlies fundraising auction that's being held this month. Auctions like this are important because animals like this are important. They're keystone species and we need to help them. You should bid on this painting because I think it's quite beautiful. This painting was inspired by a photo that a photographer named April Sims took, and I just loved the bear in repose. This one looks like it's tuckered out, maybe just thinking, dreaming about the salmon that are going to come. Yeah, just as soon as I saw the pose, I appreciated it. You can see its strength, its huge claws, but its eyes are thinking and sweet. I knew that this was heading in a direction, and it's kind of interesting when you look back and you see that you've always been heading somewhere, and this is where I've been heading, to be able to do something useful to help the animals that I find so beautiful.
Our auction has been open for 3 weeks now, and it closes this Tuesday, November 28th at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. November 28th is also Giving Tuesday, a global day of giving, celebrated worldwide, made to unleash the power of people and organizations to transform their communities and the world. It's a simple idea, a movement that encourages people to do good. As part of Giving Tuesday, a friend of the Grizzly Bear Foundation, Janet Martlin, has come forward with a very generous $10,000 matching gift in memory of her brother, Wayne. Wayne Martlin lived in Squamish, BC, and regularly walked the woods near his home with his chocolate lab, Choco, always hoping to catch a glimpse of a bear. In Wayne's memory, the Martlin family will match every dollar you donate today, helping raise $20,000 in Wayne's memory for the bears. Grizzlies capture our hearts and imaginations, and they are in our stories and our myths. They are an iconic symbol of the wild. But they need our help. They need allies like you. Please join the Martland family and give for Grizzlies.
Our relationship with grizzly bears has really transformed over time. There's no doubt that grizzlies are a symbol of the wilderness. They deserve our respect. One of the most critical things for impacting people's experience of bear viewing is the educational component. That means that we actually have a dedicated naturalist in addition to bear guides on board. We are also working with Indigenous leaders. That's critically important, that the people come away from bear viewing understanding and learning. I know for us at Blue Water Adventures, we have contributed in many ways to conservation, because the takeaway after a week out in nature on this incredible coast is that people literally have their lives changed by these tourism experiences. This is a trip of a lifetime. You need to give it a go and join an adventure yourself. Blue Water is going to be celebrating 50 years in business next year. I hope that we can find a way for grizzly bears to prosper and coexist with humans, and that it isn't us or the grizzly bears. I'm really proud of the work that Blue Water Adventures does, the importance of tourism giving back to conservation. You know, Grizzly Bear Foundation, First Nations, bear viewers, all working together, we collectively can make change. And that's what's needed.
Welcome back, and thank you for your support. You can make a donation until December 31st to receive a tax receipt this year, and our auction will be open until Tuesday, November 28th at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Last year, we shared with you coexistence stories of Marty and Andrea Van Loon on their farm in southwest BC, working and living with grizzlies. Now, we look to the next generation and their daughter, Erica Van Loon, speaking to generational stewardship as we learn to build a world we share with grizzlies.
I think in the world that we live in today, that's faced with so many threats from climate change and people expanding into wild spaces more and more and more, and certain animals like grizzly bears are pushed to their limits in many cases, and in this valley they sure have been as well. I think what's so important going forward through new generations of people is learning how we can both live respectfully together, because it's only through connections and those stories that I think we can come to better understand coexistence with species like grizzly bears. It's a third generation farm. So my grandparents immigrated from the Netherlands in 1957, and we're all still here now. My dad grew up here, me and my brothers grew up here, and we love it. There were a lot of grizzly bears here when they first came. Populations were obviously thriving back then. There was few people in the area, especially up this valley. Pemberton was only accessible by train, so it's nothing like what it was today. And it was mainly a wilderness of animals and, nature. So they interacted with a whole lot of grizzly bears. I think as I get older, it's just something that I appreciate so much more. But growing up, for me, it was just so normal, like, oh, look, there's a moose running through our field or a grizzly bear in our corn. Seeing them come through season by season and different generations, especially with the bears, I've always loved it, and it's always been so neat. Every day is different. You never know what you're gonna see. I think most people know that we live here with them, and it's a matter of how do we live better with them. So when my grandparents were here, a lot of bears, they were viewed as a problem. Essentially, coexistence was nowhere near what it is today. And even in the past 5 years from what I remember and what I know, it's changing year by year in a positive way. Over the past few years, it has had its challenges. So grizzly bears especially love carrots, and they have gotten into our carrots, although prior to last year, we did not have electric fencing. Now the bears got into our fields again. With the Grizzly Bear Foundation, as well as Coast to Cascades, they helped set up a program that allowed farmers like us with certain crops, like carrots, who had previous challenges with grizzly bears, to increase our levels of coexistence so we can still grow those crops, but we can still live amongst the bears. Certainly generationally, it has been huge, that it's making little changes year by year because we love her so much, especially because she's here year after year. I always knew I wanted to bring my studies back home to something I'm passionate about that I can work on in the future as well. I will be looking at the intersections between grizzly bear food security and Indigenous food sovereignty in the Lil'wat Nation, and how, with ongoing grizzly bear conservation, how it can be viewed as both eco and cultural restoration. So in the sense of grizzly bears thrive, but also Indigenous culture and surrounding people can thrive as well. I think it's just so incredible to be able to speak to elders who have generations upon generations of knowledge and, true coexistence with a species like grizzly bears. We see previous generations when there's new cubs in the area. It's a sign of the seasons, it's a sign of spring and new life, and it's amazing to see that shift, and yeah, I would say hope.
It's so inspiring to see the next generation walking the stewardship path toward a future coexisting with grizzly bears. Want to send someone a unique birthday wish or a message to inspire a future wildlife champion? This is your chance. This year, we have a couple of very unique items up for bid, featuring two of the world's top wildlife conservation advocates and storytellers. You can make a bid on a cameo message from wildlife advocate Grizz Kid, Wes Larson, whose work has been featured by National Geographic. Wes is a bear biologist, Yellowstone Ranger, host of the podcast Tooth and Claw, and our newest board member at the Grizzly Bear Foundation. And Birdie Gregory is a National Geographic explorer, the host of Animals Up Close, streaming now on Disney+. Birdie has been a cinematographer for BBC's David Attenborough series and is an inspiring wildlife filmmaker. Thank you, Wes and Birdie, for donating your cameo to our efforts. What a great and fun gift. This would make for any young naturalist or anyone passionate about wildlife and storytelling. The grizzly bear has long been a symbol of nature's majesty and power. In Indigenous cultures, the grizzly bear is revered as a teacher and a guardian. Recognizing this ancient relationship and the power of Indigenous-led conservation, the Grizzly Bear Foundation launched a transformative initiative in 2019 to further conservation through reconciliation. Our Indigenous Roundtable on grizzly bear conservation and bear viewing ecotourism. Here, Indigenous voices and First Nations rights and title are not only respected, but supported. Over the years, the Roundtable has become a platform for robust, open discussions. Elders and leaders share their wisdom. Indigenous guardians and bear viewing guides share their experiences and unique approach to stewardship. The Roundtable is a space where science and Indigenous knowledge come together, a two-eyed seeing approach to form a shared vision of grizzly bear stewardship. We invite you to listen and learn alongside us.
In the rugged landscapes of North America, grizzly bears have long been a symbol of nature's majesty. Yet, their survival and the connection with Indigenous ways of life are at risk. Recognizing this challenge, the Grizzly Bear Foundation launched a transformative initiative to foster reconciliation, conservation, and economic development. Which cast light on the urgent need for change. It revealed a crucial gap in the conservation of these iconic creatures, the need to build genuine relationships with First Nations communities. Our core mission was refined, placing respect for Indigenous values and conservation at its heart. Fueled by the spirit of reconciliation, the Grizzly Bear Foundation committed to building relationships with First Nations. This commitment took a concrete form in convening the first ever Indigenous Roundtable on grizzly bear conservation and bear viewing ecotourism, also known as the Round Table. The Round Table is a platform for robust, open discussion where Indigenous communities share their wisdom, their stories, and their aspirations. First Nations voices are not only heard, but respected.
We've gathered to address our issues and concerns about protecting grizzly bears. Grizzly bears play a huge role in the identity and shaping the culture of Indigenous peoples. The grizzly bear is a species that needs a voice.
We're not alone. Being at this Indigenous roundtable and watching the inception of something good that is created by us, that has our flavor, and building up with our input.
The networking that goes on with all the studies with the universities and the different groups doing bear tours, and how their communities benefit from the grizzly bear tours, stopping the hunting, and how that work would combine traditional knowledge and science, coming together of all the nations that do bear tours and other ones that have been involved in the management of the grizzly bears in their territory. I think there's a need to start to establish stewardship, all working together.
The first time I was able to go to the Indigenous Grizzly Bear Roundtable, it was incredible to hear the love and passion and the stories that my community wasn't the only community that had connections to these incredible creatures.
By bringing together First Nations leaders, Indigenous conservation organizations, Indigenous guardians, and ecotourism businesses, the Roundtable acts as a powerful catalyst and provides a unified voice for advancing policies that are aligned with conservation and reconciliation goals. The Round Table is a symbol of hope. The Round Table is an agent of change. It has emerged as a hub for driving positive change, specializing in areas such as stewardship and bear viewing. It is a space where traditional knowledge and scientific expertise merge and offers a sustainable and respectful future for grizzly bear conservation. Join us and give for grizzlies today.
Thank you to the many voices who shared their knowledge and wisdom through the Indigenous Roundtable on grizzly bear conservation. As we move into our final segment of Give for Grizzlies, we're going to share stories from ambassadors building the conservation economy that protects wild animals and wild places, giving back to the conservation of the grizzly bear. At the Grizzly Bear Foundation, our work takes us wherever grizzlies roam, from the Arctic Circle at Bear Cave Mountain to the wild plains of Yellowstone, along the rivers and ancient forests of the Rocky Mountains to the misty Pacific inlets of the Great Bear Rainforest. And now we want to bring you with us. The Grizzly Bear Foundation and the Commercial Bear Viewing Association are collaborating on a new and inspiring campaign. Bear viewing tourism gives back. #GoBearViewing. This campaign will showcase the critical role of the Commercial Bear Viewing Association in promoting sustainable bear viewing and aiding in the protection of grizzly bears. Following the 2017 closure of the grizzly bear hunt in British Columbia, bear viewing operators created a conservation licensing fee for their guests. Since 2019, close to $300,000 has been collected, and 50% of those funds support the Grizzly Bear Foundation's research, education, and advocacy efforts for the welfare and conservation of the grizzly bear. The Grizzly Bear Foundation and the Commercial Bear Viewing Association work collaboratively to advocate for the grizzly bear, places they roam, the foods they eat. The two go hand in hand.
Seeing a grizzly bear is something that grabs you from the inside, and for me, sharing that with people is such a gift.
When I first started, I was hungry. I wanted to learn as much as I can.
And in tourism, how they value and speak about the interconnectedness of holistic teaching and learning about protecting grizzly bears.
When you're here, you really and truly experience that this is the home of the great bear. Since our inception, we've been working very closely with the Commercial Bear Viewing Association. We'll be launching this campaign to tell people about how this conservation economy is supporting the welfare and conservation of the grizzly bear, and how it's supporting our work with First Nations, and also how we're giving back to the guides who are doing this work.
Everybody who is part of the CBVA believes in our best practices and believes that the bears come first.
The Commercial Bear Viewing Association's mission statement is to view wildlife in their natural habitat without disrupting their natural behaviors. I've been raving about the CBVA to everyone, and whenever I view wildlife, I follow that mission statement.
So when I was looking to become a guide and a bear viewing guide, I actually looked for a company that promoted the Commercial Bear Viewing Association, because I wanted to work with someone that supported that treatment of bears and respected their space.
Now that the grizzly hunt is closed, it's this next step and how different values need to be considered, whether it's wildlife or it's trees or the streams or salmon. But I would hope that people will understand the grizzly bear a little bit more through the work that the Grizzly Bear Foundation is doing, through the work that the Commercial Bear Viewing Association does, through the ecotourism and all of the operators in the CBVA, that people will understand and realize that there is a home for them in British Columbia that is safe.
Thank you to the many guides and lodges who have donated trips to our auction. Please make a bid now to secure your spot and support the conservation economy. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today for bidding on our auction items and for supporting our work with a generous donation. There's still time to give and receive a tax receipt for your gift before the year end. And our auction will be open a few more days till Tuesday, November 28th, Giving Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you to all our special guests. I'm not the only one here. We have a whole team behind the scenes working to make Give for Grizzlies possible. Special thanks to our creative producer, Lindsay Marie Stewart, for bringing all these beautiful films together. Our communications manager, Taylor Green, for filming today and a lot of the writing for today's show. Sarah Vickruck, our operations manager. Richard Sparrow, our Director of Indigenous-led Conservation, Connor Stefanison, Cash Shield, and Byron Long, our volunteers behind the scenes. We appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you, and please give for Grizzlies.